Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second day of our webinar on national infrastructures in EOSC. Yesterday, we heard from national approaches to different services provided by the EOSC Core and EOSC Exchange. And also we discussed national initiatives for implementing interoperability with EOSC. And a key point that was raised throughout the discussion was the need for the tools to communicate about all these types of services and about EOSC with national communities. So for today, we're going to dive a bit deeper into that. We're going to have two sessions. One, working together to support and upskill the research communities, and one on shaping and tracking policies via open science monitoring. And there will be a 1 hour break between each session around 12:30. Just to let you know, the session will be recorded throughout, and we will publish that after the event so you can rewatch. And as with yesterday, if you want to ask any questions, we've included a Slido link. You can find it here. And at any time during the session, you can ask your questions and they will be raised during the dedicated Q&A sessions, which will happen after every series of presentations. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Timea Biro of CSC in Finland, and she will introduce our first panelists.
Thank you very much, Alex, for the introduction, and thank you on my side as well to everyone who has joined this first session of the second day. In this first session, we're going to talk about means of working together to support training and upskilling of the research communities. We do have two parts to the session. So in our first part, there will be a presentation of the main key exploitable result. So the care on the EOSC future side, which in this case is the knowledge hub. And John Shepherdson will be from CESDA will be presenting that, and then we'll have national perspectives from the UK and Italian side. So I think, you know, if you have any questions, please use the Slido that has been shared, or put your questions within the chat. We prefer the first option. And without further ado, I'll pass on to our CARE co-champion, John Shepherdson from CESDA, to present the Knowledge Hub. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, as per the introduction, I'm John Shepherdson from CESDA. I'm the co-champion of Key Exploitable Result number 6, the Knowledge Hub. So co-champions are myself and Venkat. Venkat is in work package 9 of EOS Future, which is concerned with training and skills. And I'm in work package 5 of EOS Future, which is design and development of the portal demand layer. The EOSC Association representatives for this CARE are Wilhelm Widmark, who's on the board of directors, and also a member of the Data Stewardship, Curricula and Career Paths Task Force, and Susan de Michel, who's on the board of directors and a member of the PID Policy and Implementation Task Force. So what is the scope of this, the EOS Knowledge Hub? Well, it's about the development, integration and adaptation of a technical platform for training and skills activities. And that technical platform consists of two main components, a training resource catalogue and a learning platform. The training resource catalogue is really like any other online catalogue. It's got a number of filters so you can search and browse the content. And then the learning platform is based on OpenPlato, which is in itself based on Moodle. So anybody who's familiar with Moodle will be familiar with the learning platform, and that's where people can actually execute the training materials, take part in courses. So the idea is that between them, the training resource catalog will list, and the learning platform will allow you to take part in some of resources and webinars that were developed in the project or are held externally and linked to, and possibly be a repository for materials that are at risk of becoming unavailable due possibly to sustainability issues in projects that have come to the end of their funding. So the exploitable results for this are the learning platform, the actual technical platform for the training and skills activities that I've just mentioned, the training catalog, i.e. the contents of the training catalog, which are many types of material, and the idea is that it'll be designed so that access to these online courses, MOOCs, etc. will be intuitive. The procedures that were developed for actually operationalizing the Knowledge Hub and integrating it with the Eos portal. And that will be of use to people who want to do something similar within a different environment. And an open science help desk messaging application to allow the user community to submit help requests and also access support materials and take part in a user forum. So there are several target audiences for this. One is consumers of EOSC, and they might be individual researchers, research communities and their members, citizen scientists, or even commercial entities. Software developers such as EOS Future project members or members of EOS projects that are yet to come, or third parties who want to contribute a feature or a component to EOS. The EOS providers such as infrastructure training managers, or the trainers, or people who want to have their resources onboarded into the EOS infrastructure, and EOS facilitators such as administrators, funders, and librarians. So what does this CUR offer to these various interest groups? Well, for the consumers, it will allow them to search for training for EOS-related skills, look for free courses on any EOS-related topic, search for specific types of learning materials. Because of the filters in the training catalog, they'll be able to look for things of type MOOC or self-study or webinar or whatever, or find resources. So not just the whole course, but maybe find a video or some documentation from an EOS-related course. For software developers, then instructions on how to add or create a web interface to be part of the EOS infrastructure, how to import metadata into different catalogs, information about how to reuse data about open educational resources. And for facilitators, allow them to know which training resources have been created by a specific project so they can keep track of their outcomes. For providers, it will allow them to look for training resources for their own training, so that can be reused, or for existing modules to combine to make a new course, or maybe resources in a particular language, or allow them to share their resources. Also a means for them to promote their training resources by putting them in a centralized catalog where a wider audience can access them. Allow them to look and see where there are gaps in the coverage of a particular subject, or a means to provide an overview of what training is available for their community. And so the added value, we see the added value of this as being providing a centralized resource for training on all things EOSC. We also produced training materials metadata schema, which can be reused outside of the project. It's based on the RDA, ETH, RD interest group materials, but it's been further refined within the EOS Future project. And there's the potential for interaction between the learning platform and other environments such as virtual research. And why bother to make it open? Well, that's no big step for the Knowledge Hub because it's public by design. But for user engagement purposes, we think that making these resources readily available will help users to be able to get the most out of EOSC by reducing barriers to entry, because it will explain how to do whatever it is they need to do, and also demonstrate the breadth and depth of the capabilities on offer within the EOSC infrastructure. So that's the end of my presentation on key exploitable results and Knowledge Hub. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for that, John. We're going to take, if that's okay with you, we're going to take the questions in the final closing slot, the Q&A slot. So if you have any questions for John, please kindly add those to the Slido or in the chat. Now we're gonna thank you very much for that very detailed presentation of the Knowledge Hub. We're quite curious to see if within the national approaches there are commonalities, points of contact, or maybe a completely different approach that can be combined with what EOSC Future is offering. So now we're going to move on to the national perspectives, and we're going to start with the UK one. And we have Helen Clare from JISC, who's going to talk to us about the work in the field that is ongoing now in the UK.
Morning, everyone. If you can just bear with me while I share my screen. Hopefully that's okay.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So morning, everyone. My name's Helen Clare from JISC in the UK, which is the UK's National Research and Education Network. I am giving the UK perspective on the topic today, but it really is my perspective as someone who has been involved in training and services around open science for a number of years. So in this talk, what I'd like to do is give an overview of the policy background within the UK, move on to giving a brief overview of some of the various initiatives that have happened over the years. I'll talk about the general direction of travel from now on, and finish up thinking about how that relates to EOSC and the EOSC Knowledge Hub. So say I mentioned starting off with the policy background. Obviously, this is important because it's a huge driver for underpinning behaviour change and leads to the need for new types of skill. So in terms of the UK's trajectory towards open research, I mean, before I go into this, I think one of the important things to say, which relates to the theme of my talk, I think, is that context is important, and for the UK, referring to open science is not something that has proved to be very successful because it has a different interpretation, very focusing on STEM subjects. So the language we use in the UK is around open research, and UK Research and Innovation, our main research funder, champions open research through their strategy in 3 areas: looking at open access to publications, open data, software methods, protocols, and then also looking at open culture by reforming incentives and assessment. And what I'm really pleased to see here is that they also focus on the idea of a team approach to research, so supporting skills across different roles that are involved in the research process. Just a brief word about FAIR. It's not a term that's used that widely, but it is increasing. UKRI does focus on this, and increasingly there has been some pushback against the idea of open, which I'm sure many of you have come across, because not all data, it's not appropriate for all data to be open. So I think we'll start to hear much more of the discussion around FAIR in the UK, as indeed the research funders are shifting to saying, making it as open as possible, only closed where necessary. So in terms of these three areas, I'll just give a brief overview of activities relating to these three areas. And I should say this is by no means exhaustive, so apologies to any UK colleagues who are on the call and I've missed something. As I say, it's just highlighting some sort of key initiative. I also will be referring to quite a lot of different initiatives, so I'm just going to do a brief summary. The slides which you have the link to do have links embedded within them to all these different initiatives, and if you do want any further information, please do ask. So if we take the first area, looking at open access, and I think like most countries, this is the area that has made most progress. And I think in the UK, we have got a strong record of supporting open access publishing of journal articles. But in terms of the training and support around this area, most of it is really around facilitating community support and peer exchange of practice. So JISC played a large role in the UK in terms of coordinating a lot of these efforts, but we did work collaboratively with other professional bodies across the research lifecycle, such as the libraries, research managers, repositories, etc., to try and support institutions through that shift in the policy mandates towards open access. So the Open Access Good Practice Programme had an output, as you can see, back in 2017, which was essentially a funded programme to enable individual institutions to explore different aspects of open access policy implementation and share the resources and their experiences. There wasn't really a centralised hub for that, but the exchange took place in meetings, through mailing lists, in that sort of way. And I should say, at the moment, the UKRI policy, open access policy, has changed again recently. And again, JISC has, on the request of research of the UKRI, has convened a community to support institutional implementation of the new policy. So we've got a couple of examples on the slide there. So our approach to training and skills, as I say, is very community driven. A lot of the time, mainly because policy change is so quick and the landscape always changes. So producing training materials can be time consuming, and we just wanted to allow exchange as fast as possible, really. And also, again, coming back to my theme of context, we find that institutions are all different. So sometimes it's hard to produce standardized training because every institution implements open access differently in open research, and roles sit in different parts of the organization. So there's no standard approach that you can train in. So moving on to the open data, obviously open data, there's been a lot of work for a number of years, open data mandates in place. Again, JISC has played a role in convening communities and providing guidance, but also we're lucky enough to have the DCC, Digital Curation Centre in the UK, who has played a key role in providing training, support, resources, and also convening events such as the RDMF Forum every year. And they produce tools such as DMP Online for the UK and beyond. In terms of other aspects of open research, which are increasingly becoming important, things like software, methods, protocols, the Software Sustainability Institute, again, is looking at that sort of long-term preservation of software and making that available for reproducibility. And the emergence of this goes alongside the emergence of the new role of the research software engineer. So again, we have a society within the UK that is supporting this new role, and open practices are an integral part of these. I've mentioned a couple of other things in there, again, because we're lucky enough to have some of this in the UK. I mean, Elixir, the initiative there, obviously this is a transnational research infrastructure, but they have got a program on data stewardship, specifically for the UK. And at the moment, the UK isn't sort of at the forefront of developing data stewardship roles. So we are sort of catching up with some other countries, and this is a key program for the life sciences. There are also various other initiatives in the sort of the data area, particularly things like the Alan Turing Institute, which has a data science and AI educators program, the Turing Way, which is a collaborative, community-driven handbook on sort of various aspects of research, including openness. And I just want to give a quick mention to Octopus, which is a new tool if you haven't come across it, and it's being developed in collaboration with JISC and the Octopus company themselves, which is around opening up the whole process. So rather than focusing on the outputs, it's called Octopus. It identifies 8 stages, including protocols, methods, hypotheses, etc., and how we can open those up. So we are on the trajectory, as I say, of moving up, opening up the whole process, and increasingly, again, like a global shift towards looking at open culture and how we can promote that. So we have various sort of top-down approaches, looking at indicators and how we can promote research integrity. The Metric Tide report that was quite influential in 2015 has recently had an update this year, and we'll be publishing an updated response to that. We're reviewing research assessment to look at how we can encourage better research practices and open research practices. And alongside that is UKRN. So the UKRN is UK Reproducibility Network is very much a sort of bottom-up approach. So it's based on a network of institutional networks. So there are local networks at institutions and institutional leads, who also then collaborate. But it's very much, as I say, a sort of bottom-up approach. So we do have this shift towards looking at the drivers of openness, which will lead to hopefully to the behaviour change and the need for skills and training. So in terms of the direction of travel in the UK, you can see we are trying to choose my words carefully. I don't want to say fragmented, but we are distributed, shall we say, and there's lots of activity happening in different ways. And I think there are strengths to that in terms of context, as I say, being able to make open research more relevant to a researcher's area of interest and to their work. But also we are starting to see a need for some kind of consistency. So some sort of coordination and collaboration across all of these initiatives is useful, particularly to reduce duplication, but also maybe to aid with mobility and career progression. So if each have a standard approach that can be recognized across institutions. So I just want to highlight a couple of examples of this sort of increased coordination. One is the Open Researchers Competency Coalition, ORC. And this is a very informal collaboration that started about 5 years ago, mainly bringing together organizations in research support roles, so libraries, repository managers, research managers, sort of looking at who all had a stake in the training process, because each of these roles have some kind of stake in the open research process. So we've been examining skills and competencies for researchers, as well as the emerging professional support roles. We did actually, about just coming up to a year ago, work with EOSC and the Fairs Fair project and the EOSC Synergy project to bring together a lot of these stakeholders, again, to identify how we can progress open research skills in the UK. And unsurprisingly, the theme that came out of that was that more coordination was needed. So we are trying to look at ways of bringing that coordination together across our various members, while also acknowledging that the roles are different and have different needs. But the final activity I want to focus on is one that I think will be key in the UK for bringing about that coordination. I mentioned the UK Reproducibility Network earlier, and last year, about a year ago, they started an open research program, which is aiming to say for the uptake of high quality open research practices. It's been funded by Research England. So while it's UK, it is the funding only goes to English institutions, but others in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland are taking part. And their idea is to create a train the trainer program and look at the different training interventions within the partner institutions. They're also looking at things like mapping the training resources that are used and trying to put together a curated collection of resources from the resources that are already used within institutions. So there are three key parts. One is the training itself. There's also the evaluation of that training, and then the sharing of practice. So ORC and various other stakeholders are working with the UKRN to implement this project, which is, as I say, it's got around £8 million funding, and it's got 4 more years to run. So I think this is going to be a key place. As I said, they are looking at, for their training, creating what's called a living website, where they will gather resources and curate resources. So I think this is where it can link up with something like the Knowledge Hub. They are already reaching out to, obviously international initiatives and looking at standards and how they can make sure that whatever website they do create, the metadata aligns with other international initiatives such as EOSC. So I just wanted to finish up with thinking about EOSC and how it relates to UK training and skills. How does that fit? Obviously, I mean, this is a big question. I'm sure you're all aware of the political situation regarding EOSC, and it doesn't look likely that we'll be associating to Horizon anytime soon. So there are political barriers in place, but there are workarounds enabling, even though it can be difficult at times, enabling UK participation in EOSC programs, as we have a strong history of taking part in EOSC programs and projects. But that doesn't stop us working with the community, and then also working towards a technical approach to collaboration and integration. So the way that we're thinking about is trying to make sure that whatever we do in the UK uses an open infrastructure, uses international standards, is underpinned by persistent identifiers. So in a way, what we're trying to do in the UK is almost analogous to EOSC itself, where we're kind of federated approach. We don't necessarily think that we'll have one single platform in the UK. We want to sort of bring together different initiatives to work across and together. So I've mentioned a few times context is everything, and I think that's the way the UK's work in this area will develop, and I think that's the way the support for EOSC will progress, is through ensuring that EOSC is aligned with activities and relevant to activities within the UK. So I'm actually part of the EOSC Synergy project, which is just finishing up now, and that's one of EOSC's regional projects, which is looking at how to embed EOSC and looking at how to, looking at the policy environment, the training environment and technical environments within different partner countries, and seeing how we can progress that. So there's a couple of reports, I just want to highlight them, but most of these regional projects are finishing now, and their work will hopefully live on in other ways, including the EOSC Association Task Force on Upskilling Countries. And as I say, there are 13 task forces, but this is the only one to take that sort of regional sort of country and domain approach to embedding EOSC, because I think we need to make EOSC relevant to the nations, to the domains that are going to be its users and contributors. So to finish up with where that leaves the EOSC Knowledge Hub, I think in the UK, we certainly will have a need for materials on EOSC and services. I'm sure when we get the results of our audit of materials, there'll be a gap there around EOSC training and services. So we do really need access to those materials, but we'd need access to quality materials and reusable materials that we can contextualize and make most relevant to the UK. So I think the approach that EOSC Future is taking with the Knowledge Hub, focusing on making the materials as fair as possible in terms of metadata, interoperable formats, looking at supporting the use and reusability by trainers is very much on track. And I also think that we should continue to work with the EOS Association Task Force to ensure that it's as relevant as it can be to the various contexts that EOSC will be used within. So that's all I wanted to say today, and I've got various contact details if you want to get in touch or ask any questions. And if you're interested in an informal community of open science trainers, please do consider the link on the slide there, the Open Science Coordinators Community of Practice.
Thank you very much, Helen. There was a lot of very useful information, and I'm sure that also the participants to the webinar can leverage the links that you have in your presentation. These will be shared shortly after the webinar. Actually, your presentation is also linked from the chat. Those of you that are following the chat can already see some of those. So thank you very much again for the presentation. We're going to move on to the next national perspective coming from Italy. Donatella Castelli from CNR will be. You can take the floor, the virtual floor.
You should
screen?
let me. Yeah, please.
You should be able to share your screen.
Say that you have disabled.
Then Alex, can I kindly ask you to make Donatella co-host?
Okay, now it's
Okay. You should be able to share it now.
Okay, sorry.
So any questions that you might have for Helen?
Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Okay.
So thanks, thanks
you.
for the invitation. Let me close this one. So what I'm doing now is to briefly describe you what we are doing in Italy, how we are working together in Italy to support and upskill the Italian research community. And so I will show you a little bit about what we're doing, and then at the end, I will point out some link that we might have with the Knowledge Hub that was presented and with the EOSC Future Project. So first of all, I have to introduce a little bit of context. And the context in Italy is the major context is this initiative that is named the Italian Computing Data Infrastructure, ICDI. So this is an initiative, that's a bottom-up initiative that was created in 2018 when a number of representatives of main Italian research and digital infrastructure met with the idea of promoting synergies at national level. So we were participating in a lot of initiatives at European level, but we recognized that there was little exchange among us. So we decided to create this initiative. Currently, the initiative includes 23 members that are research performing organizations and universities. There are a number of others that have asked to join. They are acting as observers, but they will join soon. And the ministry is also participating in the initiative as observer, the Ministry of Research. So this is very important because we can discuss with the ministry also what are the priorities and what we plan to do. So currently, this initiative takes the form of a memorandum of understanding, but we are working to make it a legal entity. So in the context of this initiative, there are a number of activities that are going. So we have decided to work together and address a number of points or topics. One, probably the most successful of the initiative that is within, let's say, the most relevant activity that is in this initiative is the Competence Center. So this is a task force. It was created as a task force. Currently, currently, it includes, let's say, something like 50 experts from the 23 institutions that work together to understand how to support the Italian community on, let's say, increasing their participation in open science, in understanding how they can implement the FAIR principles, and how they can better participate to EOSC. So this, the Competence Center has a number of activities, and they cover aspects like, for example, there are experts that on legal and ethical aspect. So if someone actually needs to know more about the legal and ethical aspect, can, let's say, ask and pose its need to his need or needs to the Competence Center. There are experts on policy and strategies, on open access, research and data management, fair data management, and data management plan, so something related to data. And there are also, let's say, a group of experts that help the community, Italian community, on specific, on needs of specific domain sector. Because we know, for example, that data management is strongly dependent from the domain or the sector in which this is applied. So, so overall, the Competence Center has a mission that covers a number of aspects. One of these aspects is training and support in the area that I have just mentioned. But there are, within the aim of this Competence Center, there is, for example, also the aim of design and promotion of structured training and the introduction of new professional figures like data stewards in the research institution. There is this aim of sharing good practices, of making available tools and services for example, facilitating fair by design, and so on and so forth. So just to say that there is a Competence Center. In the Competence Center, there is an activity dedicated to training and support, but there are also other aspects that are addressed by the Competence Center. So this here there is the link if you are interested in understanding more to the mission document that was published in June 2021. So what happened is that currently the Competence Center already has had a number of activities in place, especially dedicated to training. So there have been courses for different type of users, for dedicated to researchers, teachers, and research support staff. The Competence Center organized, for example, courses in universities especially for PhD students. And there have been courses dedicated to training of specific professional profiles, like, for example, data stewards. In particular, let me emphasize that the Competence Center organized 5 courses since February 2021. These are courses that goes from 10 to 30 hours, dedicated to especially fair data management, open science and fair data management, that were in some way customized for a particular domain of researchers. And in doing this, these courses were, let's say, prepared, designed by experts of open science together with experts from the research infrastructures. So because we know very well that it's important to let the researchers understand what open science is, but then there are specific needs, and only those that are in the domain can understand and speak the language of the researcher specific domain. So in these 5 courses, there are more than 400 researchers were trained. Another internet experience have been the Open Science Cafe series, which were, let's say, events that are monthly organized on a specific topic. In this case, we have we organized 14 events with 1,700 participants, more than this. And these were also uploaded as videos, and so we had a large number of views. So this is a slide about this cafe series. It's very informal. You can see this, the list. I don't know if you can read, but you can find in the website. These are very interesting experiences, and there are more that are coming. So what happened is that this experience that we have made, or we are doing with the Competence Center, was then presented and discussed with representative from the regional project that Helen also mentioned, that are known as Infra EOSC 5 projects. And we understood that in some countries there was something similar to our Competence Center. In other countries, the situation was more heterogeneous. However, let's say this group of representative of project decided to submit a proposal dedicated specifically to the coordination of the activity that was characterizing the competence centers. And so this is, they submitted a proposal. The proposal has been approved, and the project is Skills for EOSC. That is a project that started in September 1st. And this is specifically dedicated to, as I told you, the coordination of training activity. So it's not, it does not support the production of training within a country, but just activities to establish synergy, doing something together among the different countries. So what I wanted to highlight is that currently this proposal is coordinated by GAR. And this is because the ICDI is not yet a legal entity. But the idea was that we wanted to participate in this project as a competence center. So that's why, not having the legal entity yet, what we have is a situation in which GAR is coordinated, but all the other, say, research and performance organization and universities in some way participate as associated entities. Just to show that this is, we wanted to stress that this is a collaborative effort, a coordinated effort. So this is more or less what is the situation. Let me conclude by saying that, by mentioning a few aspects that may establish link with EOSC future. So first of all, as you have seen, our training activities have been mainly dedicated to open science, fair data management, and fair data management, essentially. So ethical aspects, so on, but this is dedicated to this. We have not yet addressed the exploitation of EOSC and its services in our training activities. So this is something that it's in our plan, it's in the plan of the Competence Center. but we have not yet done anything about this. So maybe this is something that where Eos Future might help us. Another point is that probably I forgot to mention that we have set up a national training catalog. So there is a technology, it has been set up and so on, but at a certain point we stopped, let's say, uploading content in it because we were waiting of configuring it with, if possible, with a shared metadata format that might also be shared with the other training catalog in Europe, especially with the EOS Future, the EOSC training catalog. So we have already had some experience with the service catalog. So we have a number of service catalog, both national or related to the infrastructures, and we are adopting the EOSC catalog metadata format because clearly this facilitate interoperability. So regarding coming back to the training catalog, we are waiting to understand if and what is, let's say, the shared metadata format that we might use in order to complete and upload the content in our catalog. Another point that I wanted to highlight is that we are very interested, and this is something that we have discussed a lot, is in a solution for facilitating the reuse of training material, methodology and experiences. So this is something that we believe is key. So we are trying to find solution. Maybe this might be also, I know that is one of the topics that Eos Future is also addressing. So we are very, very interested in understanding the solution that will be delivered in the context of the Eos Future. And so this was my last slide. I thank you for the attention, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much for that, Donatella. I think we can work quite. you have timed very well your presentations. We're quite on time, so we can move on to the Q&A session. So if you, Nell, if you can take over and share the Slido view. I think we have quite a few questions that have come in. Please don't be shy. Continue adding your questions to either the Slido or the chat. We've heard from our two speakers on the national perspective, two quite different presentations, two quite different approaches to this, and I saw that some of the questions relate to that. So we saw on the UK side, there's quite a diverse landscape of also policy-related initiatives and activities. While on the Italian side, everything seems to be somehow put under the ICDI umbrella. But we would like to know then what are actually the things that are being addressed well at national level. So what are the things that are quite well covered, and what can be things that maybe can be complemented by the solutions by solutions like the Knowledge Hub. I think you've mentioned that toward the end of your presentation, Donatella, but it's one of the questions that we have received. So if you can maybe add some other points on to that, and then we can pass on to Helen to share more of the UK perspective. So again, what are the things that are covered very well at national level, and what are the things, the gaps that can be addressed by the Knowledge Hub and similar solutions?
Actually, I mentioned in my slide the ones that I believe are more relevant already. I was thinking, so you have also the platform for the creation of courses. This platform, now I'm trying to explain, this platform in some way need to be configured with respect to the kind of courses. So it's not that you use this platform and magically you do the course. So there is a design behind the scene for example, for specific courses of a specific community. So all the effort that is done to prepare some courses in, let's say, the methodology, the way in which you design the course is work that the EOS Future project is doing. If it's doing for a specific community, maybe this might be shared as well, because this would help us, or at national level, to exploit also this design work that has been done without reinventing the wheel again. Because if you design a course in a particular way, it means that you have spoken with the community, we have understood which are the requirements and so on. So if you have this design, then we can, let's say, maybe reuse part of it and implement our own for our needs. So this is might be something that I didn't put in the slides, but might be something relevant for us as well.
Yes, yeah, that sounds like something our colleagues working on the Knowledge Hub should take a note of. Helen, do you wanna?
Yeah, I wanted to respond to that in two ways, really, with two different hats that I'm wearing. And one is from the UK national perspective, is that I agree with Donatella that I think where the gaps are is about how we can make EOSC relevant to our countries and our domains within those countries. So examples that we can follow, materials that we can adapt, etc. But with my other hat on, which is that I am actually part of Work Package 9 on EOSC Future, we are looking at developing exactly such training materials by working with the science projects that are in Work Package 6 in EOSC Future. These are science projects that are going to be using EOSC, benefiting from the features of EOSC. We hope to look at their workflows, what they've benefited, and try and create sort of case studies based on their use of EOSC in different disciplines, and see if we can make it available, like Donatella says, for reuse. But I think, it'd be useful to have collaborators, I think, and we plan to work with the user groups, the EOSC Future user group, to do exactly that, to say, how is this approach is relevant in this particular domain and this particular subject? Is it relevant in others, and can it be a model in some sort of way?
Yeah, without any doubt, that hands-on experience is extremely valuable and very difficult to reproduce in other contexts. And also, I would assume the community input that these science projects bring forth. Okay, thank you very much for that. There's another very quite well voted question for Donatella and John, but I think, Donatella, you've already answered this. If someone is asking whether the resource catalogs that you mentioned are interoperable.
No, the term interoperable have several meanings, but let's say that it's what I told you. So we are trying to use a metadata format that, as much as possible, similar to the one that will be used at EOSC level, because this will facilitate the upload of our content within the EOSC catalog.
John, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, just to say that the metadata model that we're using for the EOS catalog will be made publicly available. so that people will be able to reuse it or to look at how they could do crosswalks to it. So some form of interoperability should be possible, you know, once the metadata models are published and people can see what we've got to work with.
Yeah, so that's certainly an important takeaway from this discussion. If that's available and can be, as you say, adopted in different national approaches, that would be very valuable, I think. Okay, we have a question from Eos. Is there a connection between learning material in the Knowledge Hub and informational documents on tools and data offered in the Eos portal and repositories? I've actually moved on to the latest question. Can you take that on, John? So is there a connection between the learning material in the Knowledge Hub and the informational?
I'll duck that one if I may, because Work Package 5 is responsible for the technology and not the content. And since Helen's here from Work Package 9, and I believe Venkat is here as well, I will pass it over to one of my colleagues in Work Package 9, if I may.
Okay. You want to take that on? I don't know if by any chance Venkat is around. So just for everyone's benefit, Venkat is the other co-champion of the Knowledge Hub, so of this care, and also he's leading the work package on training. Venkat.
Okay, sorry. So the question
Hello.
is about. Hi everyone. Yeah, getting dropped in it there. So is the question about the research assessment?
No, it's the question on whether there is a connection between the learning material and the Knowledge Hub and informational documents on tools and data offered in the Eos portal and repositories.
Right. So informational docs, I guess, meaning technical documentation and things like that. That is actually something that we have been asked to look into as well. Now, how we actually disseminate that, that's a good question, but I can certainly see that we can distribute that or make it available through the Knowledge Hub. It might not be part of a course or something that we're developing, because we're creating training courses as well that are going to be deployed through the Knowledge Hub. So, you know, a learner might be able to be led through some kind of course and do some assessment at the end. But yes, certainly informational or technical documentation could live there as well, because ultimately I'm trying to think where else would be a suitable home for this, and I'm not entirely sure. And I guess, yes, absolutely, the Knowledge Hub would be a suitable place ultimately.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
I should also maybe just say to Donatella as well, and I'd be happy to have a chat with you at any time offline about the metadata that we're using in the Knowledge Hub and any other aspects of what we're doing in Work Package 9 regarding the training. I'd be more than happy to have a chat about that.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, that sounds very good. You might get some other requests from the other webinar participants as well. Okay, I think we can move on then to the next question, which was the one that Venkat earlier mentioned, whether the Knowledge Hub covers any aspects related to research assessment. It's quite broad, but would you like to give it a shot? John or Venkat or Helen, you did mention points related to research assessment.
I mean, I can give it a shot and see whether Venkat agrees or not. Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is that the Knowledge Hub is focused on EOSC. So anything that we cover around research assessment would have to be about EOSC's role in that. So I think broad topics around research assessment are not likely to be there in huge quantities, but sort of supporting material around how EOSC can play a role in reforming research assessment practices would possibly be there.
Okay, Natalia, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes,
so go ahead.
Just wanted to compliment what Helen said. I think it might be too early. In Eos Future, we are focusing on the Eos, because as Helen said, and on the technologies behind and on how to support these. But we know, we are aware of many projects coming up, and the initiative of the research assessment from the European Commission. So I think, what we can do is save some space in the Knowledge Hub and the Learning platform. It's in our radar, but it's not within the Eos Future objectives. Let's put it this way.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, I think we can move on to the next question. Nell, if you can move that, if you can move it up, okay. I read it before, so. So one of the speakers talks about the Knowledge Hub as a training center. Other one sees it as a place for data. It's not clear what the Knowledge Hub is at the end, but I see that John has actually answered that question within the chat. Do you want to speak to that, John?
Well, only if any further clarification is required. I don't want to just read it out. So
okay.
If the question if it's a clear answer for the questioner, let's move on. If they want to ask a supplementary question, then go ahead, please.
Okay, so the question was anonymous. So by any chance, if John's comment in the chat has not clarified that point, please feel free to restate the question or complement that with additional clarification request if that's needed. Okay, let's move on then to the next one from Eos again. Oh, now go back. Is there a connection between I think we've already read this one. Sorry, apologies. So what are the open research skills? Can you give some examples, and are there different ones for disciplines and for different career stages? Would you like, Helen, I think you spoke.
Yeah, can I just quickly,
yes.
Sorry, excuse me, quickly address the previous question, because I think that question arose after my talk, after mine and John's. Perhaps the sort of lack of clarity comes from the fact that within the UK, I see us more as users of the resources on the platform than necessarily as users of the platform. So I think we'd be looking to pull resources out and embed them in local contexts, not always necessarily just pointing users straight to the platform. So that's why we're talking a lot about reusability and FAIR in that context of the actual materials, not of data. And the question around open research skills, I think what's happening at the moment with the UKRM programme, because I can kind of address another question that's further down about the audits that the UKRN are doing, the training audits. Essentially what's happening is that the programme is to produce a training programme and for open research. So obviously need to define a curriculum for open research before we can even do that. So part of the way that that's happening is we're looking at resources that are already available within institutions. The audit has taken place through the 18 partner institutions of the consortium, plus some extra ones because others haven't been funded, but they're still doing it as well. So it must be over 20 different institutions. And what they're looking at is resources that at first they were going to look at resources that they thought might be relevant, any resources that might be relevant, but that was just a huge task. So what they're actually doing is looking at resources within their institutions. So which resources are being used within their institutions, whether they are resources they've created themselves or whether they are pointing to resources. So it's almost using this process as a selection mechanism. So if an external resource is being used by several institutions, it's obviously got a vote from several different institutions. So rather than just looking at everything that's out there available in the open science world. So that information is currently being sort of analysed, and the report will happen shortly. But the approach that they have taken is very much along the research life cycle. So looking at the the open aspects at different parts of the research process, rather than thinking about, well, what are we doing about open data? What are we doing about it? It's about how it feeds into the research life cycle. So that will be coming shortly. I have had a preview of topics that have come out of that, and they're expecting, I mean, it's a wide range of topics, but it does cover things like data management, but also the ethical aspects, consent, GDPR, looks at pre-registration, risk assessment, due diligence, going through to digital humanities. It's quite broad, and I think one of the first challenges we have or the program has, is to actually narrow down what the priorities are for that program. But they're very similar to open science in its broadest context. So hopefully that answers both questions, I think.
I was just about to say that, yeah, you've addressed both questions. Donatella, I'll extend the question that was for Helen to you as well. Are there any audits being performed around the resources and training materials that you have available?
Yeah, the open source. Are you asking for the open source courses material? Yes.
No, there's a question. There was a question actually directed towards Helen, but I was thinking maybe you might have some some perspectives from the Italian side as well. Whether there are training resource audits ongoing, and are there any efforts around that in Italy?
In some cases, as I told you, the training material was prepared together with with the expert of the domain. So in this case, they were prepared together. So okay. Maybe this answer the question.
Yes, and then we can actually move on to the next one.
Okay.
Someone is asking you to tell us more about the experts.
Everything is public available. Some of the material is in our catalog. Most of the material is available in Zenodo, because we are not yet, as I told you, we are not yet prepared our catalog, filled our catalog. So most of the material is in Zenodo at the moment. Okay.
And can you tell us more about the experts that are delivering these courses? Are these people employed by the ICDI, or what kind of status do they have?
As I told you, this ICDI for the time being is voluntary effort. So we are collaborating together, and it's a best effort. But what we have is that there are a number of people that in a way or another are working in the context of either project or activities. For example, there are a number of people that are based in universities. So they are employed in universities, and they are in charge in the university to manage the open science activities. No? Mm-hmm. These are some of the people that participate in the group. Then there are, as I told you, is a mix of expertise. There are others that are employed for legal aspect, others that are working in research infrastructures. So it's these people decide, from time to time, these people decide to do something together. So, and there is a design of a course. I can tell you that dedicated courses takes a lot of time to be prepared, because the point is that the people that knows about open science have to transfer, they say, this way of thinking to the expert in the research infrastructures that then can speak to the researchers. And so this is, and in, let's say, establishing these common vocabulary. This is the one where the effort is spent. So it's not only in delivering the course and preparing the course, but is in adapting the language of the course to the specific community. But as I told you, is a best effort by people that are employed in university, mainly on research organization, and on the other hand, by people that really need this train. So we have a request increasingly. We have a larger request coming, especially from research infrastructures that participate, so organizations that participate in research infrastructure mainly.
Okay, thank you for that. Helen, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just to comment really about collections of resources and audits. I think you know, there are a lot of initiatives that are aiming to sort of collect together open science resources, and I think we just need to be a bit cautious about that because it's quite a difficult challenge. There are so many resources. In fact, I mean, the problem is now we've got too many resources, and it's actually the finding the relevant resources that is the difficult part. So I think if we are doing manually curated collections of resources, they need to have a clear focus that's relevant to either a nation or a domain. And I think for the wider sharing of resources, we should be focusing on that technical infrastructure. So the focus on the metadata, the standardized metadata and resource description to enable more intelligent search and discovery.
Thank you very much for that. Certainly clarifies one dimension of the problem. I think we have answered these questions. I saw one that was more directed, maybe. So both of you, John and Helen, have mentioned the EOSC Association task force, and I saw earlier a question on how the knowledge hub works together with the EOSC Association task force. Can you give us more details on that collaboration? Either John or Helen.
Well, I have to say I put that in there with an EOSC Association task force hat on, is that I'm a sort of a co-chair of the EOSC Association Upskilling Countries task force, which is kind of hoping to build on the work of the EOSC regional projects and giving that you know, national and domain sort of context. So I think it was partly just an appeal to encourage EOS projects to work with us if you're looking at sort of embedding within that. I mean, I guess because I am also EOSC Future and on that, I can do that, but I'm sure there's others in the same position as well.
Yeah, so John, would you like to add anything to that? Are there any direct means of collaboration between the Knowledge Hub and the EOSC Association other than, well, the overarching aim towards convergence that Helen was talking about?
Other than that, I'm not aware. I'm not directly involved with the EOSC Association on this topic. I don't know if Venkat is.
Okay, Venkat, you're getting again called upon.
You are.
And I'm doing too much typing at the same time. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
So we were wondering if there are any direct activities putting together the Knowledge Hub and the activities of the EOSC Association task force on this. Are you collaborating with the task force in the setup of the Knowledge Hub?
No, not directly, but there are members of, I'm not actually in, I mean, I'm in one of the task forces, but not probably the most relevant one for the Knowledge Hub. But there are other members in Work Package 9 that are, of course, Helen being one, and several others. So no, I'm not directly going to say that there is a connection there, but I think Helen probably has a better answer there.
Okay, well, Helen has already mentioned that point, has already answered that point from her double footing in both initiatives. Okay, should we move on? We have a question or the latest question on about the learning methodologies. How can we adapt to the newest learning environments and methodologies, remote, immersive? Are you also looking into this with the Knowledge Hub and with the national activities? Are there any efforts oriented towards that? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I can speak on behalf of EOSC Future. As I say, one of the roles that I'm playing within EOSC Future is to support the sort of the design of the training that we're creating within the work package, and sort of using established learning design methodologies and making sure that you know the processes are followed. And what we want to do with the materials is also is make available different options. So we are looking at good learning design firstly. So it's about, and then about how you deliver those learning objectives, those learning outcomes in different ways. So some of the different training courses we are running as sort of synchronous activities, whether that would be face-to-face or online synchronous, and then other activities that will just be standalone. So say you were just going to work in through a self-paced type of course. So I would say yes, we are very aware of the shift of learning and training approaches, and like you mentioned learning environments there as well. I guess one of the ways that we're trying to do that is to look at reusability across the board. I mean, the materials that come out of Moodle can be reused easily through a SCORM package. Fortunately, they're not that easily editable. So we are looking at ways of making the raw content available, if you like, as well. So you can upload into whichever tool that you happen to use. Yeah, we are trying to keep on top of these trends, but always looking for input, and you know, when the material becomes available, getting feedback. And I think just it'd be great to have ways within the Knowledge Hub to maybe capture how people are using the materials as well, and give feedback on that, so we can almost have case studies of use. I don't know if that's actually been discussed at all previously, but it's an idea.
I mean, as far as I know, there's still an upcoming discussion on on that. Thank you very much. I hope that answers the question, unless maybe John would like to add something on the Knowledge Hub side, if you are particularly focused in any way to adapt to the new learning environments and methodologies, or is that maybe upcoming?
That's maybe upcoming. We work closely with focus groups through all the development we're doing through Work Package 5. And so we tend to take the new components out to the focus groups and get user feedback on them. So we'll see if there is a drive to embrace those sorts of materials, and then see what we do with those requirements.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much for that. That's a very interesting though point to make, the collaboration with the focus groups that provide you with I think very valuable feedback. Donatella, would you like to add anything to the point on the learning methodologies, or is that okay? I think you've covered.
It's okay, because it's something specific. Let's say specific of those that are preparing the material, so I'm not an expert on this.
Yeah, and you did mention all the different aspects that well, you're looking into within the planning that in the CDI is being done. We have a question on legal issues. So a request very common is about legal issues. Is there any plan in EOSC Future to collect this material and support? So I think I'm guessing that the question is whether, I'll try to translate that, whether the knowledge hub includes also guidance on some of the common legal issues around open science and the EOSC and similar things. Natalia.
Yes, I
You're
think
right.
because Venkat maybe not okay. I think yes, but we need to understand that there are legal issues on two aspects. First is on open science, how to use open science, but then in foremost is for content providers and service providers. So what are the legal issues on how they are sharing the services and any resources, and what are the GDPR, what are the privacy issues? And I know that Venkat and the team is working on this on the provider and content provider side. So this is done. Now the legal issues on using open science, so and it's not just legal, I think it's also ethics and ethical issues. I think this is something that will follow, and what we need to do in Eos Future is to work with others, because there are many experts out there and many projects out there that they are doing this kind of thing, and the legal issues. I think it's on using open science. It may be very much diverse from community to community. So, it can be different in life sciences than in social sciences, although there are commonalities. But the first priority in Eos Future is to work on the legal issues concerning the data and service providers. How to support them, how to train and support them in dealing with these issues.
I hope, yeah. Thank you very much for for that, Natalia. That certainly clarifies the point, and also brings back the one of the dimensions that John was addressing in his initial introduction, that the knowledge hub is actually designed for several categories, including not only the consumers, but also providers and other target audiences that can leverage the information that is going to be shared through the knowledge hub. And of course, there's also a national dimension to these legal issues. So certainly perspectives from the national side would be valuable for that. Okay, I don't think, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think we have any other questions. I think we've covered most of, well, hopefully all of the questions, and nothing was left unanswered. But if by any chance anything was left unanswered, please feel free to get in touch with us. The presentations and the recording will be shared shortly after the webinar. So with this, I will thank our speakers and also our contributors, Venkat and Natalia. Thank you for the clarifications that you have brought on an ad hoc basis to this. Thank you to everyone who has joined the webinar. I'll pass the microphone to Alex, because I think you might want to give some details about the upcoming session. Thank you very much again.
Thank you for the session, Timea and John, Helen, and Donatella for your presentations. So we'll stick to the schedule. We're a bit early, but the next session will start at 12:30. So if you can come back then, we will rejoin and we'll start. And this time we'll be talking about open science monitoring and how within EOSC Future we're developing tools to track open science across different countries and also get the national perspectives. Until then, yeah, just enjoy the break. Hello, everyone. Welcome back for our second session of today's webinar, Shaping and Tracking Policies via Open Science Policy Monitoring. Today we'll be talking primarily about the Eos Observatory. And with that, I will hand over to Natalia Manola from Open Air, who to give a bit more of an introduction and present our speakers.
Hello, can you see my slides? Yes, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you can hear me. Hello, good afternoon to everyone. We are here to talk about tracking, and we're talking we're tracking and monitoring. So why I would like to just present some context in our discussion. So let me see. Okay, so before I introduce the speakers. So why tracking, and why tracking in open science, why tracking in EOSC? I think one of the key things that we need to understand is that EOSC is a system of systems. It has many facets, and it's crucial to align. So knowing is power. We're not tracking and we're not monitoring to penalize organizations or countries, but we are tracking in order to align. And going into that is that member states and associate countries have different views. We know that already. They have different infrastructure maturity and funding levels, which is fine because we are Europe and diversity is our strength. What we are aiming here to do in this tracking mechanism is going from diversity to convergence. We know that things are not going to be the same, and we know that one size does not fit all, but we would like to converge. And then the third thing is on the why is that countries and institutions have different levels and paces of adaptation and adoption, and they're doing it in different ways. So what is very crucial for us is to learn from each other. So what do we include in the tracking and why we're tracking? Second is just to reiterate that the European policy landscape, because we are monitoring policies, is diverse. And then we need to have some common understanding on the strategies versus policies versus implementation. What do we mean by the terminology? We need to understand that the strategies and policies on open science happen in different ways in many countries, top down, bottom up, and what is the role of the people. And then last but not least, we must realize that there are institutional policies on open science and open access for a long time in many institutions. And what we need to see is how these are aligned in terms of what is the convergence that EOS brings. So what are we tracking? We're tracking policies on open science, but it's not just open science. We're tracking data access and data governance related policies. We're tracking, in the end, we want to be tracking or to have convergence about the SLAs, IPR, GDPR, and privacy. So open science is the umbrella, but we have many different things at the bottom. And practices and implementation. How we want to track to see how people are evolving in these practices and what are the implementation mechanisms. And in the end, we want to track on the uptake. So which means is what is the reality? Okay, we have policies in place, but how effective have they been? Now, who's tracking? And this is where this workshop and webinar is of much relevance. I just put down five actors that are tracking the policies, the implementation, and the uptake. So from one hand, we have the Eos Steering Board, which is tracking member states and associate countries, and Volker is here to present the efforts. And it's the first time we have a coordinated effort, and I think this is a dream come true. Then we have EOSC Association to monitor progress and commitments from its member. We have our colleague from Austria in order to present us what they are doing in order to try to track as part of the EOSC Association member to track the progress. We have individual countries monitoring different facets of open science. So we have Biljana from Serbia here to tell us what they are trying to do at the national country for open access. Then we don't have anyone from the other two. We have the European Science Technology Observatories with open science in the center. For example, we know that the European Research Area will be tracking and monitoring the policies and the progress of the 16 or 20 priorities. One of them is open science and EOSC. And then last but not least, we have the global efforts via UNESCO, who is going to be tracking on the global level, and they're looking into EOSC in order to see what to get. Just to give you an idea, so you know how we are tracking. There are different ways, and there are different actors and efforts. So this is a snapshot of the French Open Science Monitor. So they are tracking mainly publications. Then we have Open Air Open Science Monitor, which is trying to track the update, not the uptake, not the policies. So we have country fishes based on numbers. So we're crunching numbers. Then we have in Open Air the country pages based on to have the narrative and the story of what is happening, what is actually happening in the country. Now we have the Eos Observatory, which is mainly Gareth will explain how we're going into that from Eos Future to see how we are assisting the steering board in order to track the various developments. And then last but not least, we have the UNESCO, which has a global observatory of science and technology where open science now is entering the field. So this is the landscape, a very diverse. People are measuring and are tracking and are monitoring. So it's in the agenda of everyone. And what are the issues? I'm not sure if it's issues. Is that things that we need to pay attention to. What we need to realize that this is a time-consuming process, tracking that needs engagement and commitment. So how often do we update, and what are the human resources that we need to have in place in order to have a consistent tracking and monitoring? The second issue is that converging to a common framework, indicators and metrics, and hopefully Gareth will explain and Walter will explain what we're doing on that. Third is that collecting numbers is tricky, and we have to have a common understanding. What do we mean by the questions and what do we mean by the numbers? And last is that when we're using automated methods, data quality is an issue. And this is what we have seen in Open Air. So this is the context. Let me switch back to stop sharing. And now what we would like is Gareth is to be first and explain what we're doing in Eos Future as one of the key exploitable results, that we are working very closely with the steering board and the Eos Association in order to have the tooling and the framework to get this one of these elements of tracking and monitoring. So Gareth, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Natalie. Good afternoon, everybody. And let's see if I can share my screen successfully. Can you just check if that's working, Natalie?
Yes, it's working.
Perfect. So today I'll talk very briefly about the Eos Observatory and essentially what activities are happening in monitoring, what activities is the observatory aiming to do in terms of monitoring for open science in EOSC, and what practical benefits does this monitoring tool have, not just for monitoring per se, but also for policy making. So the tool, the EOSC Observatory, is essentially a policy intelligence tool which we're developing in Eos Future. At the simplest level, it's a service tool in the back end, a survey tool, sorry, to run and collect data from surveys aimed at specific stakeholders, and then essentially presenting that data in a, let's say, a dynamic, interactive way, as you can see on the screen there, so that the public and key stakeholders can track the readiness of member states, associated countries, can track the contributions towards EOSC and open science, and essentially can track the different practices that are taking place and activities across Europe in terms of open science and EOSC. So one of the key aims of this tool is to support the monitoring of the open science and EOSC ecosystem, to directly support, for instance, the Eos Steering Board and the member states in their monitoring activities, to align with the EOSC Association, which also has its own monitoring activities, as we shall see, and to also gather other intelligence from a European perspective and from the countries in terms of open science activities. So a key aim here is to help and support the alignment of surveys and tracking of open science in EOSC, and to essentially help the developments of policies and practices for open science in EOSC. Now, if I summarize this rather simply, what we see for now for the EOSC monitoring domains are a couple of different, let's call them layers. One key layer is the member states and associated countries. So they need to monitor the uptake and the readiness of EOSC and open science. Then we have the Eos Partnership. So this is a agreement signed between the EOSC Association and the European Commission to essentially deliver EOSC under Horizon Europe. And there, the members of the EOSC Association conduct activities, make both financial and in-kind contributions towards open science and EOSC. And then this gets counted towards the activities of the Eos Partnership. On the other side, from the Commission side, the Commission agrees to fund, I think, around 490 million in activities, let's say, and project calls, tenders for EOSC in the Horizon Europe Framework Programme. And then around that, we have the greater EOSC ecosystem, and these are all the different activities that can be taking place, for instance, across Europe on a European level, or nationally within the countries. There are a variety of different activities taking place that may fall outside the scope of activities done by the member states associated countries, and also fall outside the scope of the EOSC partnership. I will skip ahead and then zoom in specifically for now. So just to go back here, what I'd like to do is just zoom in specifically on the work that we've done so far for the member states and associated countries, which has been our focus for the first year of the observatory. So to start running surveys for the EOSC Steering Board, and I think Volker will tell us a lot more about that, we worked together with the European Commission and with the Eos Steering Board to develop questions that would be sent out in a national survey called the National Contributions to EOSC under member states and associated countries. That first survey was sent out early this year, I believe, already actually last December, and then formally through the tool to collect the data in March of this year. And we have in the meantime collected that data and analyzed it. On the basis of this first initial survey, we had a look at all the different questions that we were asking, and we came forward with a more concrete monitoring framework to steer, let's say, the direction towards what we will monitor on open science and EOS for the member states, and also to steer the questions that we would ask in the surveys. So the framework that you see here is essentially a guiding tool to help send out these surveys and collect and present the data in the tool. So there's three high-level dimensions which we look at: policies, practices, and impact. And just to note that we have developed indicators in the meantime for policies and for practices. And as of yet, we're waiting to start developing indicators for impact in line with projects that have started looking at impact pathways towards open science. Then for each of these three domains, we look across specific aspects or categories of open science in EOSC. I'll go down through them very slowly. Number one is publications in open access. Number two is data. This is a little bit more complicated. This is in terms of data management, in terms of fair data, in terms of open data. Then we have open source software activities. We have services for EOSC or through EOSC. We have infrastructure, which is also somewhat more complicated in terms of human resources such as data stewards, long-term data preservation, and repositories that are connected to EOSC. And then we have some other policy priorities such as skills and training for open science, research assessment in terms of incentives and rewards for open science here. So changing the assessment system to start moving away from, let's say, the focus on high impact publications and more towards other aspects of the researchers, career, but also other aspects of open science. And then finally, engagement here, we understand in terms of citizen science for now, but may extend that, let's say, in the future towards industry engagement. To zoom in on the type of indicators that we have developed for this monitoring framework with the steering board, and also preparing for the next survey coming towards the end of this year in 2022. We've broken down types of indicators for both policies and practices. So for policies, we have essentially questions asking, do you have a national policy on X? Yes or no? For instance, do you have a national policy on open access to research publications? Next question is, do you have a financial strategy on this category? Yes or no? What is the number of research performing organizations in your countries that has a policy on this category? And what is the number of research funding organizations in your country with a policy on this category? Jumping over to practices, we also ask another suite of questions for each of these categories. So for instance, do you have a national monitoring system in place on this category? Yes or no? For instance, publications in open access. Do you have any use cases on this category? Yes or no? And if so, please explain. What are financial investments that you may be putting into this category? And what are other output indicators, or what are other concrete tracking elements that we have that are linked to this category, such as, for instance, with publications, the number of publications in open access. To give you an example of this, just for one specific category to show you how this looks, and also what the questions look like in the survey, I'll take publications, so both policies and practices for publications. So the questions here would be, do you have a national policy on open access publications? Yes or no? Do you have a financial strategy on open access to publications? Yes or no? What is the share of RPOs, or what is the number of RPOs in your country that has a policy on open access to publications? There's a specific number. What is the number of RFOs with a policy on open access to publications in your country? Again, there's a specific number. Then for practices, do you have a national monitoring system in place on open access to publications? Yes or no? Do you have use cases on open access to publications? Yes or no? And please explain. Do you have investments in open access to publications? And if so, what exactly are those financial investments in euros? And what is the number of open access publications for your specific country? Now, maybe just to note here that while most of these questions are aimed at the members of the steering board, whereby they will fill in and validate responses from the member state, there are questions where we will be automatically extracting data, and that's typically the output indicators, for instance, here at the very bottom of the screen, such as the number of open access publications. So there, for instance, we will be pulling data from the open air research graph, but we can also think of other output indicators, such as the number of open or fair data sets, which we will again also pull from the graph, or for instance, the number of services in EOSC, or the number of repositories connected to EOSC, which we are aiming to extract from the EOSC portal itself. So this is just to give an example of the indicators that we have. This one was specifically for publications. And as you can see here, there are all of these questions are asked down across all of the categories that we've put together to monitor EOSC and open science. So the next steps for the observatory are to now publish the results of this initial survey that was done under the member states on national contributions to EOSC in 2020, or rather for 2020. And then the next step on top of that is to publish this finalized monitoring framework. So it's clear what exactly is this framework monitoring, what are the indicators that are involved here, what are the questions. And then towards the EOSC symposium, we will be publishing the revised survey for the EOSC Steering Board on national contributions to EOSC for 2021. And then, of course, again, expect to publish the data openly next year. And on top of that, we will also be aligning with the EOSC Association in terms of their monitoring on the Eos Partnership, and also aligning with national efforts on EOSC and open science to track what other activities are taking place in this broader EOSC ecosystem. So long story short, the EOSC Observatory is a policy intelligence tool where we'll be collecting data across multiple layers, where we'll be working, for instance, very closely with the Eos Steering Board and the European Commission to collect data on the EOSC readiness and uptake of EOSC in member states associated countries, and then present that data publicly as an example, as you can see on the screen here. So you can track what exactly are they doing, what are the activities that they are doing, and what are the different contributions that we see across Europe, and ultimately what is the progress of EOSC across Europe as we go forward in time. And I'll stop there, Natalie.
I think that has been an excellent overview. Thank you a lot, Gareth. Because before we go to Volker, so who's going to be presenting, because the EOS future and what Gareth presented has been a work in tandem with the steering board. So Volker will explain the views and the challenges and the achievements. Before that, I would like to ask, to use the Slido for your questions. I think Neil has put it in the chat. And what I have noticed from the other sessions is that everyone, including myself, I was putting questions as anonymous. But if it's possible, use your name, because we would like to have, more engagement, and we would like to know if people, who are the people who have the questions and how we can get in touch with you, because this is important. It's important because we realize that things are being tracked at the country level. And it's very important, as I said before, not to bring, not to get to a consensus, but at least to bring some convergence in that. So please use Slido, and if possible, use your name. Volker, the floor is yours now to present, the steering board view.
Thank you, Natalia. Thanks for the opportunity to show what we have been doing and why we are doing this. So I would like to take a step back and explain why the member states and associated countries in Europe engage in this monitoring exercise. So as for every transition we are doing in society, in research, it's a transition to, for example, making open science the new normal. Needs investment, it needs participation by a large number of stakeholders. So this makes it a complex exercise, even if the single steps perhaps are rather trivial or are technically not so difficult. It needs really this working together. So where working together is needed, we need a coordination needed, and part of this coordination can be brought by national policies, because they provide a frame and an orientation for the research performing organizations, for the universities, for the funders. And we believe that this is a very important element in order to move towards open science as a new normal. And EOS, of course, makes a big part of that development. So in the ideal case, we shouldn't only produce national policies, but we should also have these policies to influence the investment decisions at national and at regional level. So this means having a policy is a nice thing, but we also need then practical investments which go along with that. At the Eos Steering Board, we have the great opportunity that we reach a lot of countries, right? We are talking about the 27 Horizon Europe member states, but we also have 12 associated countries. So you're reaching 39 countries. And if these 39 countries work in the same direction in terms of policies and in terms of agreeing to support these policies with investments, that's of course a strong movement forward. So two things we do at the steering board for the EOS. We support the EOS through policy development, through financing of EOS relevant infrastructures and organizations, and we help with the coordination of activities at European level. So in short, what we want to look at is the policies and the financing which happen at national level. So what is the motivation for doing that? So apart from this, that of course we want to have an overview how much we actually invest. We want to share best practices. This is really a key element that we say, this works in our country. Does it work also in your country? How can we help with moving forward? Some countries are further down the road, some are starting, some have a bit engaged. Then there are the smaller countries and the larger countries which have a slightly different approach in many cases. So what can we learn from each other? How can we move things forward? And of course, we also want to demonstrate the commitment of the member states and associated countries to the EOS providers, to the research performing organizations and to the funders, to send a strong signal, because very often we get the comments from the laboratories, well, EOS is a nice thing, but is there really support on the national level? Can we count on you to continue this way with us? So we want to monitor not the status quo, we want to monitor evolution. So we want to see and this of course works only over several years, how we improve the situation, how we make sure that countries involve in making policies, and how they then also finance that. And so we want to motivate ourselves as ministries, we want to motivate ourselves to do better and more for the EOSC. So this, of course, the survey we have been doing in the context of the steering board has to be seen in the context, in the larger context of open science as the new normal. And there are several monitoring exercises ongoing. There's the European Research Area, so the ERA, there's the NPR, the National Points of References, there's our survey, and there's the EOS Association survey. And probably some more. What we want to make sure is that not two questions are asked twice, that not somebody gets several surveys on his or her desk each year, so that we coordinate these things. So, and we would like to have then the Eos Observatory as a collection, analysis, and presentation point of EOSC and open science readiness. So we have been working on this already. So we have discussed the KPIs, we want the key performance indicators we want to monitor. We aligned this with the different partners, making sure that we are all on the same page there, that we avoid duplication. And then there was this development of the platform, of the technical framework to make this happen. So the EOS Future Observatory. So we have done the first survey, which was asked. So it's called the Eos Steering Board Survey of 2021. It asked for financial contributions of 2020, and it asked, as Gareth has shown, a number of questions across open science. So, for example, EOS relevant policies in place at national or regional level. So you see here this map. In blue are the countries where we have an answer, or where there is a positive answer. So it doesn't distinguish between no, we don't have a policy, or there's no answer yet. And you see indicated in yellow where there are best practices, where there are countries with financial strategies linked to this policy. And so then there was also the possibility to have best practices mentioned, and this will be further extended in the next survey. So you see already there are quite some policies in place which support EOSC, but it's not complete yet, so there's still some work to be done. Then we have, of course, this interesting question of, is there financial contribution to EOSC on the national level? So one could answer yes, there is, or it's partly related to the policy, so which if it's not directly linked. So this gives quite a good overview where financing is connected. And then we ask for how much did you actually invest in 2020? And we have a ballpark number of 200 million, but we figured out after the survey that there was not so much clarity on what we would include into financing of EOS there. So we have to work on that. And this brings me to the last slide with the next steps. So we are going to put all these results, or EOS Future is going to work with us on that to report about the first survey by the time of the EOS Symposium. So probably it's available shortly before, but that's really the goal, to have this then presented there. We want to, in the next edition of the survey, so the 22 survey, extend to all aspects of open science, for example, open access. And as Gareth said, at that point, we might have other sources who have to answer to these questions. It's not, we now define the questions, and then we are discussing who is best suited to answer them. So we have to clarify also the methodology for determining national financial contributions to EOS. And we have to continue to coordinate with other monitoring exercises to avoid overlaps. So that's especially with the EOS Association survey. And as Gareth also already underlined, we favor pulling of information, because a lot of information is out there, over asking survey questions, because it puts a lot of load on the colleagues who have to gather in this information. And we have also, going along with our survey activities, we have a Eos Steering Board it's called an open opinion paper. So it's kind of a statement or a commitment of the member states and associated countries to achieve open science goals. So this goes along with the monitoring that we say, not only we want to measure how much publications are open in open access, for example, but we also want to set a goal, how much we want to achieve in a certain time frame. Thank you.
Thank you, Volker. I think, this has been, in my view, a very extensive, not just exercise, but these numbers that you are gathering and the expert, and the experience gaining from gathering this number will influence a lot of what is happening at the national country. So, many people are involved and many people are committed to see, and get to see how these numbers are progressing in evolution. So this is going to be, I would say, fun. Okay. Now let's go from what is happening, in Eos Future, in the steering board. Let's go at the national level. So we have now a presentation on how open science monitoring is viewed in Austria by Ilire Hassani Mavriki, if I pronounce it well,
yes,
from Technical University of Graz. So Ilire, we are all ears to hear how things are happening at the national level.
thanks a lot. Thank you also for the introduction and for the invitation. Today, I will speak in the role of the chair of the management board of the Eos Support Office Austria. And of course, all these highlights that were made in previous presentations and all the results that are evident on this international level, they have an impact on our work on a national level. So we also know that monitoring of EOS co-creation processes on the one hand, but also monitoring of the open science policies as a general term has implications for scientific work and cooperation. And specifically in higher education, it has implications in research assessment and reward systems, but also in funding, as already mentioned. And we also take care of society aspects like reskilling or upskilling of particular professions. And we think that there are synergies between different monitoring activities. We also realize that there are different data sources. So data collection is very decentralized and we need alignment there. And as you can see in this illustration, of course, different actors play a major role when it comes to the monitoring. So we have Austrian government, and in the case of previous speakers, of course, this is reflected through the Eos Steering Board in our case. Then we have different institutions and different communities, different initiatives that we want to have on board. And on the other side, we have EOSC Association and all EOSC-related projects, and EOSC Future being, for example, one of them, and then the European Commission and other activities going on there. And we want to converge all these activities and come up with an alignment when it comes to the monitoring of open science and EOSC. For us, the main question is, where do different national strategies reinforce this broad landscape of open science policies? And also in specific case, where do they reinforce the EOSC building process? And we are sure that there are different factors that maybe have an impact to different national strategies. And our aim is to find out how can we benefit from all these different overlaps. So how do we do that? We have an instrument that is being already established. So we tackle these aspects in the scope of our EOSC mandated organization and specifically under the scope of the Eos Support Office Austria. So just for the information, our mandated organization is under the Austrian Federal Ministry of Education, Science and Research. And we have a legal entity, our ACONET association, that acts also as our NRN. And the Eos Support Office Austria is the operational node. How do we work together? We have a memorandum of understanding that was signed last year. So with this, we also mark the establishment of the mandated organization. And we have, of course, members and observers of the EOSC association, but we also have extraordinary partners. So we want to make sure that we cover the whole landscape. So other institutions that are not necessarily members or observers are invited to join the initiative. Within this initiative, we have two working groups that work on the monitoring activities. First, we have an Austria country profile. So in this working group, we do like a basic screening of all the results, outcomes, and we publish our reports quarterly. So we want to know how, if there are new projects, like EOSC related projects, for example, if there are new research data management policies coming from the universities and other activities. And even though this provides us with a basic information, it is very helpful source that is used also at the ministry level, or it's used also from the rectorates. So when they organize workshops, they ask us for the up-to-date reports, just to illustrate the point. And how these, if I can tell them, if I can call them KPIs, how this would look like. So this is like a basic presentation. For example, currently we have 6 EU projects on Open Science Fair and EOSC. We have like 9 RDM policies at university level. We have 1 national policy in open science, and we have 10 institutional data repositories. So this gives just a good overview of our landscape. Then we have another working group, a KPI working group, which deals more professionally with monitoring of our open science and EOSC activities. And within this working group, we develop measurable indicators to make the success of EOSC visible at international level, and to make sure that we are aligned with all these monitoring activities that are evident in an international level. And of course, we see KPIs as a steering instrument for targeted, impact-oriented further development of open science in Austria, and also EOSC compliant implementation. Even though we are maybe EOSC focused, I have to say that we try to cover all other initiatives. And how do we do that? We started last year with the very first workshop where we invited also Gareth, and we are very helpful that he was present there, and he presented for the first time to the Austrian community the Eos Observatory. This workshop was very helpful because back then we really were struggling in the mapping of different layers in the Eos Observatory to our vision, to our key indicators. And this was first step towards this mapping activity, if I can frame it like that, because we realized that, of course, we cannot design yet another monitoring framework on a national level without aligning to existing frameworks in an international level. And other activities that we also had during the last months was a national alignment and information exchange when it comes to EOSC association surveys, for example, additional activities plan. We wanted to make sure that we avoid multiple reporting. We also discussed the overlap between the mandated organizations and members, but also the overlap between us all and the steering board. So we are very well aligned at this level. Then we continued our work by organizing a second workshop in May, where we invited all the Austrian stakeholders. And this was very helpful because now we have like a stakeholder mapping, and all relevant stakeholders are included in this landscape study. So we have the ministries, we have federal agencies, we have the audit office, municipalities, funders, research performing organizations, museums, and national libraries. So what we have done until now, we have established our methodology. So as mentioned, the KPIs according to STRIA and the Eos Observatory were, so these two elements were considered as input. Then we worked on a stakeholder mapping, and we identify national strategies, policies, and relevant data sources. And we designed our KPI model. So we made sure that we align different policy stakeholders on different levels. We have defined our objectives. So we summarized all our indicators in 17 objectives. And then we mapped this with existing indicators. We have defined also methods and responsibilities how to make this monitoring a success. We followed a past scheme. So we want to consider political, economic, social, and technological factors. And we try to come up with an EOSC impact frame based on this scheme. Just to illustrate the point, we want to focus on impact. So as input, we have different resources, we have committed efforts and time, and the output can be measured by finding out what is produced, what is conducted, but more important are the outcomes. So what do we want to achieve? What are our goals? And with this methodology, we want to measure impact by finding out what effects took place. And of course, this can be directly or indirectly. And this is, of course, a circle. So we want to, from the feedback that we get from the first evaluation, then we want to again re-evaluate our model and try to align with all the input that also we get from the international level. So this is all from my part, and I thank you for your attention and happy to answer then questions.
I think this was an excellent presentation, and from coming from Greece, I'm envious on how you're setting up your working groups. And as we are setting up things, I think what we would like, I will pass on the slides to my colleagues here in Greece and see if we can learn from what you're doing. Also, before Biljana, I give the floor to Biljana. There is a new wide area project starting, which is PATHOS, which is Pathways to Open Science. And what it's going to do is going to be it's going to be tackling this last bit on the impact. What is the actual impact, not of science and technology, but the openness and the cloudness and the EOS. What is this impact? Because what we consider is to say, okay, we just get these numbers out, but it's difficult to attribute the impact based on the money and the efforts that we have done on open science and EOS. So this is something that is a study, and I will I will tell my colleagues to contact you. So
thanks a lot.
Yes. So going now to Serbia, our colleague Biljana will tell us how they are approaching the open science monitoring in Serbia. Biljana.
Yes. But my presentation will be much shorter since we
It's
are
fine.
yeah, because we are also much smaller than the others. But I think maybe it is interesting for the others to see how the things are going in small scientific community, which Serbia for sure is smaller. I'm coming from the University of Belgrade, working in the computer center, but also working as a node for open air for the years. And for the Serbian case, the situation is that we have our national platform on open science, which is rather old. Our ministry adopted in 2012, and we have already new one, but it is not officially adopted, and hope it will be early 2023. What we really have now, we have quite a lot of data, which is publicly announced. And let's say, like in our evaluation criteria, the very important thing is how much researchers publish in, let's say, famous international journals indexed in the Web of Science. So for them, we produce a graphic how much of them are open, and so this is quite openly available for our university. But the picture we always use to market of all development, it's on this slide. It is of course on the not in this low resolution. It is a time graph, and it is updated by our nice colleague Milica Ševković. So on this one picture, we could see at the above of the baseline, we see how many institutions developed their and maintained their repositories. In most cases, there are hybrid ones, including with not only publications, but also on the data. And below the line, we have the policies adopted on the institutions. And this picture we used almost to motivate our institutions and to show them if other institutions in Serbia already did and implemented, developed repositories and maintain repositories, and on the other side adopted policies, you could also do it. And I think that this picture motivates quite a lot of them in that direction. And our desired situation is that for all repositories, we already have the basic statistics, let's say, the level of openness of all the data and records they have in their repositories, but we plan to include much more in this graph, because they would like to have also longitudinal changes in their work. So we will also implement here by year, by embargo period. For now, we just show the data according to the openness. So every repository could know how much they are really open. And since especially for the small country, there is really no need, and exactly we don't enough people to develop our services for monitoring. So we are very oriented and like to use open air services, especially this one in in observatory. And we try to do this and market this not only with our decision makers, but also from our colleagues from the regions, because OpenAir developed these services based on the much more data than we could collect. So, and we use this to present how the openness is going in our country. And just to share something very, very new. Serbian decision makers, in our case, this is a ministry responsible for science, and also in small country, there are the same people who are also fund the research, and they like to have everything, but they don't want to pay exactly to fund or to invest in this kind of services. So what we succeed is try to meet their needs and our needs. So, and this is one example. Our ministry like to fund, and they already did it, a national quiz system. Yeah. And this is something they are interested for, and this is quite new. This is a test version. And we, of course, collect all the data for the repository. So this is stupid to mention. But we try to put here a lot of openness. They even do not know that there we will put also this kind. I will move to the English just because this is in Cyrillic, yeah, and I will put it here. So, and we will put a lot of openness indicators in these graphics. So this is how we find a way, because if you want to have something like this, you have to fund those people who developed all this. So, and we will find this way, trying to input all this monitoring and measuring in the project they would like to fund. Okay, and this is, I think, almost everything I would like to share what is happening in Serbia according to monitoring.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Biljana. And I think what you presented in the last slide is of key importance, because as we are setting up, this tracking and monitor at countries where we know of our policies, I think what is important is that the national quiz systems will be of key value. And this is something that we're working in OpenAir to see how we can sync and align to these national quiz systems. But funding is something that we need to work on. Let me try now to recap. So what I heard, and maybe the colleagues from Eos Future will be able to present the questions in the chat. Okay, yes, yeah, thank you. So what I heard is, I think reinforce what I more or less presented in the beginning in the context. So what I see is that in EOSC, and EOSC Association is not here for the moment, is that we are trying to track, and Volker and Gareth, correct me if I'm wrong, as the initial stage is we're trying to track the policies, the intentions, the commitments for sure, and then we are moving slowly and steadily towards the practices and the uptake or the impact. Is this correct? Yes. Okay. So on the Austrian case, what we see is that they are trying to do more or less the same, but they are kind of aligned with the Eos Future and the steering board, or the steering board and then Eos Future. And then what is happening is, so the question is to Ilire is, how does the work that you are doing is fitting into the steering board? Because so for example, this is the first question is, how do these surveys complement each other? do we have different targets? And Biljana is not at this point in Serbia in place that they're doing this kind of survey, but Austria seems you are. So how can you explain again, because you said something in your presentation, but how does it feed into the Eos Steering Board, and how does it feed into the Eos concentration survey?
Thank you for this question. So maybe like to officially present it as a process, maybe we are not yet there, but we have considered this in our model, and we have like informal exchange with our steering board member, so Stefan Hanslik, and when he needs information, then he contacts the Eos Support Office Austria. So it's this informal, and I think it works very well, the communication. And if he needs like results from us, then we provide them. The thing, and then, so this is one part. For me, would be maybe in future to see something more that works more automatically. I don't know, like from the Eos Observatory, or that he can, or in this particular case, it doesn't matter if it's Austria, but the steering board members, that they can maybe ask for help or for support, for input from other structures. So if this can be done automatically within the observatory, for me that would be like an added value, for example, so that we make sure that all the input that we gathered, all valuable input from our data sources, are fed in automatically in the surveys. The other side is EOSC association and additional activities plan surveys. So each member, of course, they have to fill in the surveys on their own, but we have agreed that we should align on a national level, and especially at the beginning. So when the survey was sent out from the first time, we needed again an informal alignment to make sure that we do not like that our input is not very diverse. So we also consulted on like how to report the FTEs and which activities, because on a national level, of course, we work together on national funded projects. And I can say that these surveys, of course, complement each other, but in our case, we are very well aligned, and we communicate informally, and this helps to make sure that what we provide in these both surveys also makes sense, and that we avoid the duplication of reporting and of efforts.
Okay, thank you. I think this covers. But Volker, can I come back to you now and say, okay, now Austria is lucky to have a ministry that is being able to support this EOSC office, or EOSC support office, or secretariat, or whatever it's called. What happens in other countries that they don't have that? So, you say, you have responded to Ellie saying that this is, once per year, giving an update each year. But what is the commitment, and what are the resources, not the commitment, what are the resources, and what is the effort needed from the steering board members who don't have such a support office to provide this information? I know that there are different models. Maybe you could elaborate on this?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So the main advantage, I think, and we sometimes forget when we go into the technical details, the main point is the reflection process in the countries. Countries which don't yet have something in place, they get a bit pushed in this direction, saying, well, do I actually know where this investment goes? Do I actually know how well we are on the way with open science? Should I put some monitoring in place there? For some countries, the answer is yes, we want to put something in place ourselves. And in other cases, it's rather saying, okay, I pull this information from the open air monitoring or from other sources, and I rely on that. But in any case, one has this reflection process starting. Then to answer the question how the intelligence was then gathered in the different countries, that's as different as the different countries. So some have an office at the ministry which puts all this together. In other cases, the steering board member then asks certain research performing organizations for this input, or larger consortia. So this, I think that's, for me, this is a bit secondary. I think this reflection process is really really the most important thing. And I would go so far as to say the actual numbers which we then present at the end, they are not so relevant. We want to see the evolution. We want to see that things improve. It's very, very difficult for some things to put this quantitatively. And each country has a bit of a slightly different method then to do this estimate. I'm not talking about open access to publications that one can more or less count, right? That's easier. But if one asks, for example, what is your investment into open science, so what do you count in there, what not? So this is a bit difficult to really nail down. And there I would really encourage that colleagues feel at ease with the process and say, well, this is how we do this in our country. This is how we see the approach there. But then to do this consistently over the years so that we see if things evolve.
Yeah, so I hear what you say. So consistency, because I've heard, some members when we were discussing, about how to respond to the surveys is, do we go in the first response conservatively? Do we lower the numbers because we're not sure, or do we go, full blown that we say, this is happening in our institution or country, and then what happens the next year? So what you're saying is consistency. If you go conservatively on one, then you should keep up this pace somehow, because what you want to see is the evolution. And what you want to see is the reflection, so that the countries become more aware of the processes and this. I think this is a great message to pass on.
I would also go conservatively, because of course every country wants to look good in this kind of service, but if one explodes the numbers too far, it has to be also believable. We have to have the impact, even if we don't measure it fully yet. But if we say, for example, if we would say in our country, we put out 100 million euros a year, perhaps colleagues would say, well, but where do I see this directly in the impact? Where is the big advancement there? So I think we have to be very careful. And we did a mistake perhaps in the past in EOS, that we oversold a bit how far we are, and we shouldn't do this mistake again. We should have realistic numbers there.
Exactly, and also, well, but just Gareth, yes, please. Just what I wanted to bring up is that there is a distinction where the money for open science and European Open Science Cloud is, and what are the overlaps on research infrastructure. So, what is the overlap? Because that was a discussion the other day. Gareth.
Yeah, just to come back and take a step back on the complementation of the surveys. So I think we need to be clear what's being monitored, at least from the side of the Eos Steering Board and the Eos Association. So for the Eos Steering Board, they're monitoring national contributions to EOSC and open science, and that's aimed specifically at the member state associated country level, possibly other countries as well, by the way, that may be interested in joining. For the Eos Association, there's two surveys also that will be run annually. The first is the Additional Activities Plan, which essentially collects the in-kind contributions towards the Eos Partnership by the members of the Eos Association. So it's a subset of the organizations, research performing and research funding organizations within a country that are members of the association as part of the Eos Partnership. There's also their second survey, which looks at how those contributions align specifically with the KPIs set down by the Eos Partnership in agreement with the European Commission, right? So these are the different types of surveys. They have different, let's say, scopes. On the one hand, the Eos Steering Board looks at the full picture from the member state associated country. And then for the Eos Association, it's looking at the responses from the members of the association, the RPOs and RFOs, and their contributions towards the Eos partnership. Now, on top of that, originally, when the questions were being put together for the Eos Steering Board, a mapping exercise was done to see, is there overlap in questions here? Because we don't want to confuse people, for instance, if they have to fill in both surveys and so forth. And the overlap was essentially tried to be kept as minimal as possible. So in reality, there's not too much, I think, of an overlap in the questions that are being asked. Where there is an overlap is the data that comes in and the possible reporting that is coming in, right? Where there may be an overlap in terms of what's reported at the high level for the member state, and then these contributions that are coming in from specific members of the EOSC association within a country may also be reporting. That's not a problem. These two essentially, feed in or complement each other. So there is complementation, let's say, in the surveys, in the alignment of the surveys, in the data collection, and the data that actually comes in. I don't know if Volker wants to add to that, but that has been, let's say, taken into account in the design and setup of all of this, and has been carefully, let's say, monitored as we go through it. A final overlap might be where some individuals ultimately end up being involved in both surveys. For instance, a representative of the steering board may be gathering data, or they may include colleagues from the country who may or may not be involved in activities of the EOSC association. But again, there, the overlap is not a problem because the scope and the target of both of these surveys has been kept separate and will be kept separate.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. I think what I would comment on this is that this is a beginning of a process, and even though we are keeping things distinct for the moment, hopefully is that somehow we will converge. It's just that the objectives may be different. Not the objectives, the actors may be different. So in EOSC association, it's members of the EOSC association, so where it's individual organizations, where the steering board looks at the whole country picture. And I think the steering board results would be very much relevant to the ERA results, to the ERA monitoring. Okay, going to the next question is, I know that Volker has responded on this on the chat and the questions, but maybe you want to also say about this, Volker, about the up-to-dateness and of the data of the survey.
Yeah, so as I wrote, so we do the survey once a year for the steering board. We ask specifically for a calendar year or fiscal year for the financial contributions. That's easier than for the steering board members. They can go into their system and say, okay, this is what we spent in 2020, and next time we're going to ask for 2021. For the policies, it's at the moment when colleagues fill this, they say, okay, we have a policy on X and Y, and so this is of course then updated also once a year, and what is like a accumulating database is the cases, the best practices, the use cases. So this of course is cumulative, so once you enter one, it's probably not gone away in the next year. So we don't give a certain date on the information, but we say, okay, once a year this is reviewed, and I think for policies that's also good enough. One doesn't need more granularity. I cannot say for the association survey, right? There are different times because you have to do this AAP, the additional activities program, and there, I think for some KPIs there was once an idea to monitor this twice a year, but perhaps Gareth can answer to that.
Yeah, my understanding was that there could be a prognosis made for activities for a given year early in the year, and then of course that would be revisited towards the end of the year or after the end of the year, where the numbers would be actualized. But I'm not 100% sure how that works time-wise at the moment for the surveys for the association. I know that this month they're wrapping up the second survey for the additional activities plan, and they're soon to send out the first surveys linked to the key performance indicators for the Eos Partnership this month as well. So it seems to be taking place around October this year.
Okay, I think also if I can complement, I think having the tooling that we're doing in the tool that we're doing in Eos Future really helps that, because this is a tool. It's not like a survey that you have to close in order to get the results. Is that it's flexible, and we can get the results, based on and update the diagrams, almost every day if needed. So this is, as long as it refers to 1 year, as Volker said. So the tooling, I think, in my opinion, is very flexible. Can I skip? I will go back to the question about the infrastructure policies, but since we are in the tooling and the survey, can I go to Josh's questions? That are the sources of information used in the surveys known? Example, open and can be verified. So sources, before Garrett and Volker, respond, is that resources, we have 2 types of resources. We have, the ones that we get the data from, and also the people. So Volker or Garrett, do you want to take up this?
I can take a stab first, and then I'm going to pass the book on to Volker. So I'm not sure what level Eos is looking for here. The source of information let's just focus on the Eos Steering Board survey for the moment. The source of information for us is twofold. It's the members of the Eos Steering Board. So our source of information is the representatives of the member states associated countries. And our second source is this automatic data I've said we'd like to collect, particularly on output indicators, which would be, for instance, the open air research graph, or the EOS portal, or ... wherever else we can extract data, such as even Eurostat, where we may want to relativize indicators to GDP or per certain number of researchers in a country or so forth. But the data source coming from the steering board, I pass that on to Volker.
Yes, thanks. I think what Jos is aiming at is, is it possible then at some point to download an Excel sheet with with what we have put in? That's one point, and I think that's the idea. For the filling the survey, of course, I mean the policies, that's kind of open information, and I think everybody with a bit of energy could go and try to find which country has which policy. So I think there we don't track necessarily where this information comes from. Where it's a bit more tricky is the financial contributions, because as one can understand that the different ministries want to keep a bit of a control what kind of information is handed out there. It's also in some cases a bit tricky, because if it's not labeled this is a EOS financing, then one overlaps with other financing programs. So that's a bit, we have to help the ministries there a bit in order to be able to disclose this information. And the way we do this is that we say, for the time being, we just present the lump sum of what is spent in Europe in total into EOS. And this is a bit like the same at the association level, where individual organizations are a bit hesitant to disclose this kind of numbers. For example, how many FTEs are spent in a certain domain, because it might then conflict with other reportings they have to do in their countries. So long story short, so I think the information about the policies is kind of straightforward. The information about the funding will always be a bit indirect, unless we all agree on the same full methodology. And yes, Jos, you are going to be able to download a table with the results, and then can use that.
Yeah. And okay, thank you. And I think, if I can add, it's a matter of trust. How do we learn how to trust each other, and how to learn for all of us to be more open and be transparent. So it's openness. This is what it's about. So hopefully, as Gareth said, this is going to be a tool, not just an intelligence tool, but a tool to for the reflection and the realization that we have nothing to hide, I think. Again, I will skip the question, because Gareth, it's a different question. So Maybe I don't know who can answer the question on EOS policy data collection. Is there overlap with fair sharing? I could answer the question, but maybe Gareth.
Just pull up the question. So is there overlap with fair sharing? I'm not 100% sure. It depends what types of policies and the scope of the policy collection of fair sharing is. Strictly speaking, for the Eos Steering Board again, we're collecting policies on all of those categories that I listed, such as publications, data, software, services, infrastructure, skills and training, assessment and engagement. And that's strictly speaking policies that are at a national/governmental level. So I'm not 100% sure if there's an overlap there really with fair sharing. It's possible that those policies at national level have a knock-on effect on policies within the countries or are adopted to some extent by institutions or target institutions. So there could be an overlap there in that sense.
If I would like also to add is that fair sharing could be one of these data sources, an open data source that we get data from, and we can have as an indicator. Again, you know, these are, as open areas, those are all supporting data sources for indicators. Okay. Gareth, if we can go back to the question from this anonymous user. So, you know, I think it's something that I mentioned in the beginning. So it's not about open science policies, but it's also about infrastructure policies, it's about, you know, IP policies, ethical policies. So do we plan, and I think it's not just to Gareth, this is also to Volker, because Volker is, you know, the steering board is coordinating this effort. Do we have any plans to go to additional types of policies, like, for example, preservation policies, or, you know, different data access policies, IP, ethical policies?
So the idea for the moment has been to try to restrict the number of questions for our poor colleagues to have to fill in the surveys. We already have 96 indicators in this restricted framework on policies and practices, which will be translated directly into questions and possibly sub-questions, which is already quite a number of questions that they need to respond to. Specifically for infrastructure, it is more complicated. We've identified 3 categories for now that we want to focus on. Number 1 is data stewardship. So do you have a policy on data stewardship? Do you have a financial strategy on data stewardship? ... with the output indicator there being the number of data stewards in FTEs per country, if it's possible to track that right now. The second one is on what we've called connecting repositories to EOSC, which has intentionally been left somewhat open. So this is to see what is being done in terms of linking up to EOSC within the countries. There, the output indicator is the number of repositories connected to EOSC, whatever we mean by connected. And the third one is on long-term data preservation, with an output indicator there being the number of repositories that actually have a long-term data preservation strategy or policy in place. So yes, the infrastructure is broken down into more complicated, let's say, subcomponents. And the idea here is to, so maybe I should just step back and say that essentially what we're trying to do is multifold with the observatory. It's not just about collecting data that we know that is there. It's also a nudging mechanism in a way to identify those aspects which perhaps are new or where the member states would like to work towards. And so we try to set, let's say, the questions predicting, looking ahead foresightfully, and then to start nudging, let's say, in that direction towards collecting data on specific categories of open science in EOSC. The third one, which supports this, is a mutual learning, let's say, support mechanism around the observatory. More specifically, that as the member states start filling in the different policies and practices that they have, we'll see that some member states perhaps have certain priorities, others different priorities. We'll see that some member states are more advanced than others, where others may be less advanced on certain topics. And the idea there is that they can then reach out to each other. They can see what the other colleagues are doing. They can look at best practice or rather good practices that are happening within the member states. And then they can reach out to their colleagues and ask how did they do that, or how they could perhaps implement this in their own country. So it's kind of a collection, let's say, of different aims, number one, is to collect data, of course, that's there, and essentially to nudge towards data that we would like to start collecting in the future, and then to support member states through mutual learning, so that they can all, prioritize those aspects which they find important, invest in those aspects which they find important, and then learn from colleagues to actually implement those aspects through lessons learned from their colleagues.
Okay, Volker, anything to add on this? So we can go to the last question from Biljana, and maybe Biljana, you can tell us some of these challenges, or you already told me some of these challenges.
Yes, and now I will not complain for the money. Okay, so I find a quite big challenge is the lack of people. I make it short, but I will explain in a few sentences. Let's say in all these actions, we need an IT people, and we must have their support in all these activities. But they are not interesting for this kind of actions, and on top of that, they could not be paid. They think they deserved. So this is the first point for the lack of people. The second point is that there is a lack of people in libraries who want to change their everyday practice. They must educate again. They must change what they doing on the everyday base for years, and not a lot of them want to change that. And at the last point, also the lack of people, exactly the lack of brave people who are decision makers. I'm sure that for few last years in the offices, especially in the ministry, but also the universities, the open science is not very high on their priority list. They know that this is something that the researchers working in the researcher organization must follow, especially those ones who are pretending to have European Commission funding projects. They know that, but usually, I think they usually think again this Biljana with her open science dreaming. So I think that this is the biggest three challenges for the small countries. The lack of people could be a short answer.
The lack of people. If I can, rephrase what you said from my understanding, and maybe perhaps Ilire or Volker can give their views, so we can close. Is that from your point of view, even a CRIS system that is measuring open access to publications is hard, and I know that ERA is also is focusing on that. It's really hard, and since we haven't solved the tracking and monitoring of open access to publications, how do we move into the more elaborate tracking of open science in general? And Volker, I don't know if you said that is that we are moving fast towards to measure citizen science and to measure that. So if we are not able to measure the simple stuff that we are we are familiar with, can we go to this more elaborate scheme? And this is a challenge. This is a challenge for countries, because maybe they don't understand. And also, what Biljana said is the funders in small countries, and coming from a small country, is that we have different priorities. So innovation, for example, is priority number one for some of the smaller countries, and we hope that somehow magically open science will feed into this innovation, but we're not. We're giving all of our money into innovation. So how can we bring on board the smaller countries, in a more coordinated effort? What can the Eos Steering Board can do for this, and what can tools like Eos Future do?
So if I may, I think important here is that we recognize that countries have different priorities, that we move at different speed, and it is not necessary that everybody moves at the same speed. So we can neither say, okay, let's take the approach where we look at the most advanced ones and we all try to move on at that pace, but we can also not say, well, there are a lot of countries who cannot do this or that or get engaged, for example, in citizen science. So we don't want to invest in monitoring that. So we have to assure that we measure progress at each category, as well for the advanced countries as for the countries which have other priorities at the time being, and that we use this as a motivation to look into these aspects. For example, by providing best practices use cases on citizen science, how they then feed back and improving research in a country, for example. So by providing good examples and by providing expertise with that, I think this can help then to, again, go into this reflection process, what should be done in the research context in a given country. But I think we have to be sure that this monitoring exercise doesn't end up in a blaming and shaming exercise. So that's always a very important message. We want to do better, and we don't want to say this country is doing this excellent and this one not. That's not the goal, right? It's not.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's Biljana didn't ask that because I think, for example, Serbia, knowing Biljana and the work that they're doing an excellent work in open science. Okay, but it's just that the monitoring and the tracking mechanisms are not in place because somebody does not see them as important as the others. And this is where I think, Biljana, this kind of interaction, I think we need to learn from each other, and what I would do, for example, as Greece, I would say, okay, look at Austria, look at how, neat things they're doing. They have an Eos support office who one of their tasks is to monitor and track and monitor. Why can't we have this in Greece? I think this is what we can do at this point in time. And the steering board can be, an umbrella mechanism and the Eos Observatory for us. At least, it's a start. That's what I would do. Okay. Now, because it's we're past our time and we have 34 people left, which is I think it's considered to be good that that you were able to stay with us for such a long 2 days. And I don't want to make a big statement about these webinars or workshops, and I don't know how to call them, but for sure we tried it out in Eos Future because what we're trying to do is to seek what we're doing in Eos Future is how does it relate to the national initiatives, to the RI's initiatives and the national and the library. So we have all of this outreach. In my opinion, is now that Eos Future will have a major release at 1 or 2 months in the next 1 or 2 months of all the services, the portal and all the services. And what we should do and what we will do is based on of each of these, let's say, key exploitable results to arrange with the national stakeholders a better and broader dialogue. So don't try to condense everything in 2 days, but have these discussions on a more, to allow more people to get to interact. We need to know not only what Austria and Serbia are doing, but we need to do, for example, in this observatory, what more countries are doing. We need to see how they are setting up the national portals for the services, for example. So what we will do as Eos Future is go through each of these curves and see how we can pursue this further. That will come after the release, and I think after Eos Symposium, because the Eos Symposium will be something that will tell us, to bring physically all of us together to see what are the touching points, to see where we should focus on, and how we can proceed. So for me personally, these 2 days have been, a very good example of how we can move forward, and more to come. So now I will, pass on the floor to the organizers to see, what are the next steps, because I know that we will be writing some report.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Yes, I just want to thank everyone who's joined us over these 2 days. As Natalia mentioned, the next step is to really go more in depth into these key exploitable results and to kind of better contextualize, the role of national actors in the implementation and further development of the EOSC community. So there will be more information on the KERs on the EOSC Future website. There will be a dedicated page for each one, and we will also be providing more information around the symposium. So we invite you to follow us on social media, the EOSC Future Twitter and LinkedIn handles, but also check our website. We will keep you all, of course, informed. And for these particular sessions, we will be sending all the registrants links once the recordings and PowerPoints are available. So just thank you again.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Goodbye, everyone.